topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV, where we bring you educational information from top local experts in the fields of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. Now sit back and listen to experts in family law, association law, hearing loss, business brokers, home care, along with many other topics. Now here are your hosts, Steve-O and Sophia.
Hey, good afternoon, Houston. Welcome to another Ask the Experts, where we bring you the finest experts in the fields of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. Today is a very special show. Today's show is our long-running expert in estate planning, and I belong to a very large church in Florida. And I'm actually a prayer counselor there. And it just seems like every week somebody is passing away from our church. And I'm talking about people in their 40s, people in their 50s. And I always wonder, they probably had no idea. They didn't have any major health issues. And did they plan for the future? Because a lot of these people have families. And I always start thinking about Attorney Dean going, why could these people not plan for their futures? Let me welcome you to one of the finest estate planning attorneys in the state of Texas, Julia Dean. Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon, Steve. It's so good to be here.
Well, we love having you on, and I just hope that this show is to educate people, and that hopefully people will figure out that they haven't really made any plans for the future, even things as easy as a will, Julia.
Right.
And we just never know when today is the last day for us.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean to sound morbid or anything that I think about you, but you have so much to offer someone who hasn't planned for their future. And again, even if it's just a simple will, because you don't have to be a multimillionaire, do you?
No, everyone who has any assets at all needs to be doing something to protect them. And anyone at all needs to think about their own disability plan too. So, things like powers of attorney and wills at the very least, but there's so much more we can do too. But for sure, everyone needs to be thinking about their estate plan in one way or another.
Well, the other day we got a letter from San Antonio, Texas, someone who enjoys your show. And I started thinking about, God, there's always new people finding our show, enjoying our show. Tell people about yourself and about your firm.
Thank you. Well, I'm Julia Dean. I'm the managing attorney of the Dean Law Firm here in Sugar Land, Texas, which is the Houston area. And I have the privilege of helping people create their legacies, secure them, and amplify them by utilizing strategic estate planning methods. And I just enjoy helping people with that portion of it, as well as a lot of different areas that intersect with that. So probate, once a will has to go through probate or we don't have a will, we'll be assisting you through that process. And then elder law, which also encompasses special needs trust planning as well. But dealing with Medicaid and long-term care issues. And then guardianship. So again, if someone hasn't planned, then we have to go in and do a guardianship if someone is disabled. And of course, our goal is always to prevent those things. We'd rather keep you out of a guardianship and probate, but especially a guardianship, because those are incredibly expensive and time consuming.
Well, today we're going to be talking about gifting. What is gifting?
So when we want to give our assets, whether in our lifetime or upon our passing, to someone else, we want to think about how do we gift that without minimizing or eliminating any kind of gift tax to someone else, and in a way that we're thoughtful, so that if there is a gift tax issue, maybe not now, but in the future, and had we planned correctly right now, we wouldn't be incurring that in the future, then of course we want to do that.
Well, when's a gift, I guess, not considered a gift?
That's a good way to put it. A gift not considered a gift. So if we're loaning out money and there is a document that establishes that this is a note to our child and they're expected to repay it, even if they don't repay it and we forgive it later on. It was originally at least a loan, and it was not a gift. Now, if we forgive it, then it could turn into gifting kinds of situations. But there's a variety of gifts, and we can give outright gifts right now. We can give outright gifts upon our death. We can give gifts in trust that are considered what we call completed gifts. So the IRS sees them as done, or they can be incomplete gifts where they're not considered done by the IRS. So there's a variety of gifting that we can do and methods that we can do this.
Julie, do you ever have people that take back the gifts?
Well, they may want to. It depends how they've given it. Yeah, exactly. And sometimes, like, for example, people gift in anticipation of going into a nursing home. Well, that it's not effective unless you've done it at least 5 years in advance. So it's going to disqualify you, and then the Medicaid is going to require you to somehow get that money to last during that period of time that would cover the gifting that you did. And so that's sometimes where we see gifts coming back if they can, but if they've used them, then they're in a really bad situation. But usually our gifts, once they're given, are not such that we can bring them back unless the other person decides to gift it back to us.
Is there a way to avoid gift tax in Texas?
So let's kind of talk about the gift tax. So there is what we call a lifetime gifting exemption. So, and there's an estate or death tax exemption. So let's say right now the estate tax exemption is 10 million plus inflation. So we're at 12.92 million. So most people aren't worried about that. Also, the lifetime gifting exemption is at 12.92 million. So 10 million plus inflation. So if we start gifting during our lifetime, that means we have less to cover upon our death because they are unified. So if we gift $1 million, say it's 10 million, we have 9 million to cover upon our death. Well, in 2026, January 1st, 2026, so just a little over 2 years from now, it will revert back to 5 million plus inflation. And it could go lower. It's been as low as 600,000 since I started in this area. And the estate tax, when you get over that exemption, has ranged from 35% to 70%. So we're actually at the low end right now to 40%, excuse me. And so anything over that exemption amount is taxed at a 40%. So think of the lifetime gifting amount as, okay, because it's unified with the death tax exemption, we're just kind of crediting it for the future. So if we gift, we have to file a gift tax return, but we're paying zero in tax unless we go over that amount. Now, there's certain kinds of gifts that we don't even have to worry about that lifetime gifting exemption. We can give them and not even have to file a gift tax return, and it doesn't go against our lifetime exemption. So some of those are the annual exclusion amount. So we can gift a certain amount every year per person. So it could be 10 people. It doesn't have to be just our family members, but we can gift that amount every year. And we don't have to file a gift tax return on it. So the amount this year is $17,000 per year per person. So I could gift it, if I have 3 children, I can gift it to the 3 children. So $17,000 times 3. If I want to gift to Aunt Susie and Uncle Sam, and we usually don't want to gift to Uncle Sam, let's pick someone else, Uncle Will, then, we can gift to them as well. If we're married, we can double that gift. It's actually called gift splitting. I don't know why. It's gift doubling. So you could gift $34,000 a year to each of those people as husband and wife. And so some people do that on a regular basis, and which is really good because whatever they gift is starting to bring down their estate. So they have less that they have to cover upon their death from death taxes. There are other gifts that we can give that don't go against our lifetime or our lifetime exemption. Yes. That would be things like gifts that we may pay for medical expenses or for tuition. So let's say we have a grandchild and we want to help out with the tuition. If we pay the grandchild and they pay their tuition, that does not qualify. But if we pay the institution itself, so let's say they're going to U of H, so they pay University of Houston directly for tuition only, then that would qualify, and it would matter the amount. So maybe they're paying $50,000 towards tuition. That's okay. We don't have to worry about that going against our $17,000 or against our lifetime gifting exemption. So that's one exception to that rule. But remember, not to the grandchild who turns around and pays U of H. Instead, we pay directly to the university or college. Same thing for medical expenses. So let's say you're helping out a parent with medical expenses. You don't want to give that to the parent to pay the doctor. You pay the doctor directly. And then we're not concerned about making sure it's under that $17,000, and we're not having to file a gift tax return. Instead, it comes off of our state, and any amount is fine as long as it's for medical expenses and is paid directly to the medical provider.
What about transferring a house from the parent to a child?
That is a good question, because we want to think about, do we transfer it now or do we transfer it upon death? Because if we transfer it upon death, we get what's called a tax basis adjustment, usually a step up in basis. So let's say the parent has bought that house for $50,000, but by the time they pass away, it's worth $500,000 because they've lived there a long time. There's a $450,000 capital gains there. And if we want to avoid that capital gains bill, then what we will do is we'll transfer it upon death because we get a new tax basis. So it's as if your parents bought it for $500,000, and now you as a child are not having to pay capital gains on that $450,000 gain. They did try to take that away from us a couple of years ago. That didn't pass. So we still have the ability to, upon death, get a new tax basis. And usually that's a step up in basis, unless there's been a loss. And then you take a loss, but again, then it's helping you on the tax side of things. So we're getting a new tax basis. If we transfer it during our lifetime, however, we don't. So it transfers at fair market value. And so let's say it's that $500,000, they paid $50,000. Now we're paying capital gains on that $450,000 as a part of that transfer. Or we're also capturing that as a gift. So the $450,000 gift, the $500,000 gift to that person. So we're worried about gifting. We need to file a gift tax return because it's going to them, but we're also having to pay the capital gains. So we're not paying it at that actual time. We'll pay it when they sell it, but we have a low tax basis, if that makes sense. So that capital gains is still there, where we could have avoided that sometimes if we had just waited until they pass away to gift it. Now, there may be other reasons we want to gift it during their lifetime. Maybe there isn't that much capital gains. We're going to have still a similar tax basis, so we're not too worried about it. Or there's a homestead exemption that the child has, that they want to go ahead and make that transfer now. So, but we do need to think about, okay, are we concerned about that tax basis? Are we concerned about having to pay large capital gains later on when that house is sold? Do we need to file a gift tax return? And do we want to use any of our gift tax exemption? Because remember, when we use our gift tax exemption, we have less to protect upon our death. And so it really depends on the parent situation when they're gifting it, and also the child's situation.
We just got a text in from a listener wanting to know, is it hard to prove a gift?
Well, generally we're going to be filing a gift tax return on larger gifts, but you do want to have some kind of documentation. If you're doing some of the annual exclusion gifts, I would do it in a check or some other way that you would know that you're giving that amount and that you can establish that. Because if the IRS ever audits you, you do need to be able to prove that. So, do you think about documentation? Don't think just because I don't have to file a gift tax return that I shouldn't worry about the documentation. Yes, absolutely worry about the documentation and make sure it shows it's an annual exclusion gift on the check, or however you decide to give it to them, that there's some way of tracing it in some kind of receipt.
Okay, we just got another question. Jackson in, I guess this is North Houston. Okay. They want to know if I guess it's separate, is a gift separate property in Texas?
Okay, yes, gifts are separate property in Texas. So let's say your parent gifted you, the house, and then the house is now separate property. Because anything even acquired during marriage as a gift or inheritance is separate property. Where we find an issue is where people, like with a house, it's easier because it's title and we can say, okay, yes, if you helped to benefit the house with your community assets, with income from marriage, then we would have a right of reimbursement of half of that to the other spouse but they wouldn't get the house. It would still stay your own separate property. The problem with other assets, like let's say you're getting $100,000 in a brokerage account. Well, that $100,000 is generating interest and dividends off of that, right? So that interest and dividends, though, during a marriage is community property. It is not separate property. If you leave it in the same account, it all becomes community property, because the presumption in Texas is that it is all separate or community property if we cannot, especially if we commingle it, or we cannot figure out if it is separate property or community property. So we're always, for our own separate property, needing to establish, and by clear and convincing evidence, that this is our separate property. So you want to make sure if you're gifted something that could get commingled like that, like a brokerage account, then what you want to do is make sure any of the interest, increase, dividends that are coming off of that account get swept away into a separate in a community property account, So you're in a separate property account, you label it a married woman dealing with her separate property, or a married man dealing with his separate property, and then the interest and income all the time, it just sweeps off automatically, and it goes off into a community property account. That it stays community property, and then the separate property stays separate property, and that's our way of getting around it. Or do a marital property agreement that establishes that what's in there and any increase in there, that's going to stay my separate property. So just be careful when you get gifts that you are keeping them separate, because most people think, well, I know my gift's separate property, but what they don't know is they can easily commingle that, and then all of it becomes community property. And you don't want to find that out if you're going through a divorce, or there's an issue when you pass away and what's separate property or what's community property.
Gail in Galveston wants to know, how much is a title transfer cost in Texas?
I am not sure on that. Yeah, so I don't handle the title transfers. So. Are you talking about maybe a deed to the home?
They just said a title transfer.
Yeah.
Maybe
So
they
there's
can write us
title
back.
searches, which I should say, I'm not sure, and it would depend on the value of the house and how much effort they're doing. But as far as transferring a deed into the home, it would depend on, what the attorney's fee is. Ours is $400 plus 50 of expenses usually in most counties out here.
What happens if you don't report a gift?
If you don't report a gift, that could be an issue, especially if it's over that $17,000 per year per person, then, we want to make sure that you go ahead and file a late return. Just go ahead and get it on there. Just because we want to have that so that it's not an issue when you pass away, how much exemption that you have, because what you don't want is a tax coming and hitting you a lot later. Or your estate a lot later because they didn't know that you had made these huge gifts beforehand. So I always recommend that whenever it is, just go back and file it and make sure that it's taken care of.
Well, I've always said that, Julia, you should have been a professor, college professor, the way you handle questions. You just make it so easy to understand. I always like following up with, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I love asking this question. Why should I retain your firm to handle my planning versus another firm?
Well, our goal is to really provide excellent legal services with the kind of 5-star concierge service for each of our clients. And we care, we want to listen to you. We want to find out what your desires are. We want to make your plan really address those concerns that you have. Every plan is different. Every person I meet is different. So it's very customized to you and the individual. There's so many things that as I dig into just what their desires are, that I realize, we need to do this kind of additional planning. We need to have these contingency plans in place. And sometimes it's not even what you're thinking of, but just kind of what I hear that it makes me realize, wow, we need to do a whole lot more here. And so it's just your protection to be able to come in and to talk and to be educated and to, in the context of that, really fashion it to your desires and your family. Every family I've talked to is different, and just what might be your concern may not be someone else's concern, but it's so important that we address it in a good way that will proactively prevent problems in the future.
And also I said that people need to plan for this, but maybe you have planned, but sometimes a second opinion is also good too. Julia, give everybody your phone number.
My phone number is 281-277-3326. And we would love to meet with you.
What about you? Do you have a website?
I do. It's Julia, Julia, Dean, DEAN, law, LAW.com. So just juliadeanlaw.com.
This is without a doubt always one of my easiest shows to do. Julie is with us every month, and she's going to be back with us again, not next week, but the following week. And we'll have more on estate planning. Julia, have a wonderful and blessed weekend. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
That's attorney Julia Dean. I adore her. She is fabulous. If you were looking, maybe it's just the will, go sit down and talk to her. She has this whole list in her mind, the things you might not ever even think about. So it's worth your time to go sit down with her. And we're going to be back with you again next Friday with more Ask the Experts. We'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in today to the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV. Tune in next week and every week to hear more from our experts on personal injury, insurance, air condition repairs, estate planning, Medicare, and many other topics in the areas of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. See you next week.